the real reason Raskolnikov committed murder. In 1866, Dostoevsky wrote a story about a murderer. More than 150 years later, people all over the world are still reading it, not because of the crime, and not because of the investigation, but because it revealed something terrifying about human nature. A question that seems simple at first. What happens when a person becomes convinced that the rules no longer apply to them? This is the story of Raskolnikov, a young man, intelligent, ambitious, someone who dreams of changing his life. But he lives in a tiny room barely large enough for himself. He has no money, he has abandoned his studies, and little by little, he begins to isolate himself from everyone around him. Inside that small room, he spends long hours alone with his thoughts, and sometimes, thoughts can be more dangerous than any weapon. As time passes, Raskolnikov starts noticing something. History does not always remember the kind people. It remembers those who changed the world. Napoleon, conquerors, revolutionaries, people who broke the rules and imposed their will on history. And that is when a strange idea begins to grow inside his mind. What if humanity is divided into two groups? Ordinary people who must obey the law, and extraordinary people who have the right to break it if it serves a greater purpose. At first, it is only an idea. Then it becomes a belief. And finally, it becomes an experiment. In his city, there is an old pawnbroker. Almost everyone despises her. Raskolnikov sees her as someone who profits from the suffering of the poor. And he begins asking himself a dangerous question. If this woman disappeared, and her money was used to help those in need, wouldn't the world be a better place? The more he asks the question, the easier the answer becomes. Until one day, he decides to find out for himself. He walks to her apartment, closes the door behind him, and within minutes, the woman is dead. Raskolnikov returns to his room. He closes the door, sits on the edge of his bed, and waits. He expects to hear screams in the streets, a violent knock at the door, police officers climbing the stairs. But none of it happens. An hour passes. Then two. Then an entire night. The world moves on as if nothing happened. And that is exactly what he wanted, isn't it? His plan worked. He escaped. No one seems to suspect him. He should feel relieved, victorious, even. But instead, he feels something far worse. Fear. A fear he cannot explain. Every footstep in the hallway makes him freeze. Every knock at the door sends his heart racing. Even the casual glances of strangers begin to feel like accusations. And every time he tries to convince himself that what he did was reasonable, another voice inside him refuses to agree. That is when he begins to discover the truth. The problem was never the old woman. The problem was the idea itself. The idea he had spent months building inside his mind. The belief that he was extraordinary. That he had the right to cross a line that others could not. But what if he was wrong? What if he was not extraordinary at all? What if he was simply another human being trying to justify the unjustifiable? That question begins to haunt him more than the police ever could. And the harder he tries to escape it, the stronger it becomes. But something even stranger is about to happen. Because the greatest threat to Raskolnikov is not the law. It is the realization that deep down, he never truly believed his own theory. As the days pass, it becomes clear that Raskolnikov is fighting a battle he cannot win, not against the police, not against the investigators, but against himself. Every argument he once used to justify his actions begins to fall apart. He had convinced himself that great people have the right to step beyond the law, but if he was truly great, why was he so afraid? Why did he avoid people's eyes? Why did the weight of the crime follow him everywhere he went? Then Sonia enters his life. A young woman who has suffered more hardship than most people could imagine. And yet, despite everything, she has managed to keep her humanity. When Raskolnikov speaks with her, he does not find complicated philosophy. He does not find clever excuses. Instead, he finds something much simpler. Honesty. For the first time in a long while, he feels seen. Not as a genius. Not as an extraordinary man. Not as a hero, but as a lost human being desperately trying to escape the truth. And slowly, that truth becomes impossible to ignore. The murder did not only destroy the lives of its victims, it destroyed his own life as well. In the end, he makes the one decision he has feared from the very beginning. He confesses, he tells the truth, and he is sentenced to years of hard labor in Siberia. That might sound like the end of the story, but in many ways, it is actually the beginning. Because the real punishment was never the prison sentence. The real punishment began the moment he picked up the axe. The sleepless nights, the fear, the guilt, the realization that he could never become the person he imagined himself to be. And that is why Crime and Punishment continues to be read today. Not because it is a story about murder, but because it asks a question that remains as relevant now as it was more than a century ago. How far can a person go in deceiving themselves? And how many terrible decisions begin with an idea that sounds reasonable at first? Perhaps that is why readers are not frightened by Raskolnikov. They recognize something familiar in him, the part of us that tries to justify our mistakes, the part that searches for excuses, and the part that already knows the truth, no matter how hard we try to avoid it. So what do you think? Was Raskolnikov a criminal from the very beginning, or was it the idea he believed in that turned him into one?